Hello, my friend. Welcome to Dreamy Nights. I'm so glad you're here. Tonight, we'll wander together into a quiet world, a place where snow falls in perfect silence, and even time seems to breathe softly. Imagine a landscape wrapped in white, the air cool and still, every flake drifting like a whispered secret from the sky. This evening we'll follow a gentle soul, a small Arctic fox named Liora, whose steps trace the poetry of winter itself. So settle in, take a slow breath, and let the day dissolve into calm. When you're ready, our story begins. The world lay quiet beneath a boundless sky of pearl gray light. Snow fell in delicate strands, thin as breath, soft as thought. Each flake drifted downward at its own unhurried rhythm, turning the land into a dream of pale stillness. No wind stirred the air. Only the faintest whisper of movement passed between the falling snow and the frozen ground. In this silence, the Arctic seemed to hum with peace. The vastness was alive, yet nothing demanded to be heard. The sound of the snow itself, that subtle, near-imaginary hush, became the world's only song. From beneath a ridge of drifted white, a small shape stirred. A gentle movement, almost indistinguishable from the snow around it. Then a pair of bright eyes opened, calm, steady, and filled with quiet knowing. Liora emerged slowly, stretching her narrow frame against the soft resistance of the snow. Her fur caught the light like brushed silk, blending seamlessly with the landscape. Only her eyes, luminous and alert, revealed her presence. She paused, nose lifted, drawing in the pure cold air. It smelled faintly of pine and distant ice, clean, simple, endlessly soothing. She took her first step into the morning, leaving behind a perfect print in the untouched snow. The mark filled almost instantly as flakes drifted down, erasing her path as gently as a sigh. Around her, the world shimmered. The sun hid behind a pale veil of clouds, casting no shadow, only diffuse light that made every edge soft. The horizon seemed to blur land, sky, and thought, all mingling into one tranquil expanse. Far away, a ridge caught the light sparkling with frost. Liora's gaze lingered there, but she did not hurry. Her movements were measured, her pace deliberate. In the Arctic, time had no sharp corners, only smooth, continuous moments. As she moved, the snow whispered beneath her paws, a sound so faint it could have been imagined. A soft rustle, a hush, the voice of the earth turning inward for sleep. A faint wind brushed across the tundra, carrying with it a trace of something, perhaps the memory of a distant forest, or the scent of sea ice beyond the horizon. Liora tilted her head slightly, her fur shifting with the breeze. It was not a call to travel, nor a sign of change. Just a reminder, the world was vast, and she was part of it, perfectly and quietly. The light deepened as the morning drifted onward. Snow continued to fall, slower now, thicker. Tiny flakes landed on Liora's back and melted into her warmth. She paused by a low rise of snow-dusted stones and sat curling her tail around her body. From this small height, she could see far across the whitened land. The view was endless. No sound of water, no trace of human life, only the still pulse of nature. Somewhere deep beneath the snow, a frozen stream waited for spring. Somewhere beyond sight, the northern lights slept within the sky, preparing to wake at nightfall. She watched, listening to the stillness as though it spoke. The Arctic had its own language, one not of words, but of texture, rhythm, and pause. It said, "Rest, breathe, and be." A single flake landed upon her nose, glimmering for a heartbeat before disappearing. She blinked once, as if acknowledging a greeting from the sky. As daylight began its soft descent toward the long afternoon, Liora rose once more and began to walk again, slow, rhythmic, unhurried. Each step created a whisper. Each breath formed a brief cloud of warmth in the cold. The quiet was complete, yet it did not feel empty. Instead, it felt full of calm, full of belonging, full of peace. In the gentle vastness, Liora was both alone and embraced. The snow fell like the softest lullaby, covering the land, the air, and her thoughts in white serenity. And as the Arctic breathed around her, she continued her silent journey, one paw print at a time, into the heart of the shimmering silence. Snow continued to drift from the sky, tender and soundless, layering the earth in fine, unbroken whiteness. The morning light had softened further, fading into the silvery calm of midday. All around, the air shimmered with tiny motes of frost, each one reflecting a faint glint of hidden sunlight. The Arctic was at peace, perfectly still, a world woven entirely from silence and light. Liora moved slowly through the whiteness, her small paws pressing rhythmic imprints into the snow. Each step was deliberate, each motion part of a quiet ritual she had practiced through countless winters. The flakes that landed on her fur melted almost instantly, absorbed by the warmth beneath her thick coat. When she paused, the snow around her seemed to pause, as well as if the land itself mirrored her calm. Above her, a single strand of cloud unfurled across the sky, pale, translucent, almost motionless. The sunlight behind it shimmered like brushed silver, spreading a soft radiance over the frozen world. The air carried no edge, only gentleness. Even the wind, when it came, seemed to move carefully, mindful not to disturb the stillness below. In the far distance, faint lines of frost traced the edges of low pines half buried beneath snow. Liora approached them, the faint scent of the trees mixing with the mineral sharpness of ice. The branches swayed slightly, shedding small flurries that drifted lazily to the ground. Each fall made a faint pattering sound, like the soft beat of a drum heard from a dream. She brushed past a small drift and paused beside one of the pines. There, beneath its low branches, the ground was dappled with pockets of uncovered snow, a secret hollow of calm hidden beneath the canopy. She crouched down, curling her tail around her paws, watching the flakes fall through the light like slow-moving stars. In that moment, it felt as though time had folded inward. The stillness deepened warm, despite the cold familiar, despite the vastness. The world seemed to breathe alongside her slow, measured content.
How?
The fox's eyes drifted half-closed. Through them, the snow became a blur of brightness and shadow. The air an endless dance of tiny, silent particles. She listened. The faint crackle of ice underfoot, the delicate whisper of wind brushing through pine needles. These were her lullabies. In the quiet, her thoughts wandered not toward hunger or shelter, but toward simple being. The rhythm of her heart felt matched to the rhythm of the land. There was no need to chase, no need to hide, only to exist, to move gently through the endless white, to be part of its harmony. The forest around her was not large, just a small cluster of trees clinging to life beneath the snow's weight. Yet to Liora it felt infinite, a world within a world where each branch and drift held meaning. A single icicle suspended from a branch glowed faintly in the filtered light, its tip releasing a slow droplet that vanished before it touched the ground. That was how the Arctic spoke, in gestures, not words. In stillness that carried stories, in silence that shimmered with quiet understanding.
Pushe.
After a while, she rose again, stretching her legs and shaking snow from her fur. Tiny clouds of frost lifted and fell around her like dust motes in sunlight. The air had grown colder, but also clearer, as if the day were preparing to yield to evening. The horizon brightened faintly, a low silver band, where the sun lingered behind veils of drifting snow. Liora began to walk once more, following the edge of the forest. Her tail brushed against the snow-laden branches as she passed, scattering light powder into the air. The flakes swirled gently, glinting like faint sparks before fading. She left a winding path of prints behind her, looping between the trees, vanishing and reappearing as the snow thickened. The marks were temporary, destined to fade. But she moved without concern, for she knew that impermanence was part of the beauty of this place. The Arctic taught this lesson with every breath: nothing endures forever and nothing needs to. The world remakes itself quietly again and again through the steady rhythm of snowfall. As she reached the open plain once more, the light dimmed into a soft twilight blue. Snow fell slower now, thicker flakes that caught and reflected the faint radiance from above. The sky seemed close, protective, infinite. Liora looked upward, her gaze tracing the first hints of night forming in the east. The silence felt fuller now, rich and deep, as if it held a secret waiting to be dreamed rather than told. She exhaled a small cloud into the air, and it drifted upward, merging with the falling snow. The world around her seemed to glow from within, a gentle pulse beneath the white, a breath beneath the stillness. The snow's whisper became almost tangible, a soft hum that wrapped her in calm. Liora closed her eyes for a long moment, feeling the quiet settle through her. Each flake that touched her fur carried its own small note of peace. The Arctic was singing not in melody, but in stillness, in the unbroken softness of snow that never hurried to reach the ground. And beneath that vast, unspoken harmony, the little fox continued her slow passage across the tundra, wrapped in the white whisper's embrace. The day folded quietly into evening. The horizon had softened to shades of pale lavender and blue, each hue melting into the next, without edge or hurry. Snow still fell, but slower now, drifting like small pieces of moonlight. The air carried a faint glow, the kind that comes when the sun no longer lingers, yet the darkness has not quite arrived. Liora moved across the tundra with unhurried grace. Her white coat shimmered faintly under the sky's fading light, blending her perfectly with the land. Each breath she exhaled formed a brief silver mist, vanishing as soon as it appeared. The rhythm of her movement, step, pause, listen, became a quiet meditation. Far ahead, a slope of snow rose gently toward a frozen ridge. Liora's paws pressed faintly into the powder as she climbed her steps, soundless, except for the faint, delicate crunch beneath her. Around her, the vastness unfolded endlessly. No boundaries, no urgency, only the soft repetition of breath and snow and sky. At the crest of the ridge, she stopped. The land stretched outward in every direction, untouched and serene. Below lay a valley of soft curves. The snow there undisturbed its surface, glimmering faintly under the dimming light. In the distance, a few thin lines of smoke-like mist rose from unseen fissures in the ice. Gentle exhalations from the sleeping earth. Liora sat, her tail curling neatly around her paws, and watched the quiet world breathe. She felt the air move across her fur, not cold but clear, a presence rather than a temperature. In its touch, she sensed connection. The snow, the wind, the endless open sky, all part of one tranquil rhythm. The Arctic was alive in stillness, a living silence that carried no weight of time. Every falling flake seemed to mark a moment of thought, a pause too delicate to name. For a long while she remained there, unmoving her gaze, drifting from one distant horizon to another. The light deepened gradually into twilight, softening every contour, wrapping the world in the first hush of night. A faint sound reached her, the quiet crack of shifting ice beneath the snow. It came from the valley below, low and hollow, like the distant echo of a sigh. Liora's ears twitched, but she did not startle. The sound was not threat or warning. It was simply the landscape adjusting, breathing in its slow, patient way. She descended the ridge, her paws finding sure footing along the slope. The snow gave gently beneath her weight, folding in around her prints, cushioning each step. The air smelled faintly of stone and frost, the cleanest scent imaginable. At the valley's edge, the snow thickened. Small, intricate drifts curled in spirals along the ground, shaped by winds that had passed hours before. Liora paused to examine them, tiny sculptures of motion captured in stillness. She lowered her head, breathing softly over one, watching as her warmth caused it to shift and collapse in slow motion. A faint smile, invisible, but felt pass through her being. Here in this place where nothing hurried and nothing resisted, even impermanence was beautiful. But she moved onward, tracing a slow, curving path through the valley. Above her, the sky began to open. Thin ribbons of faint green light appeared shimmering across the darkness, as if painted by breath. The first stirrings of the aurora. The snow caught that light and reflected it in muted tones, turning the white into a soft wash of emerald and blue. Liora looked upward, her gaze wide calm. The lights moved with fluid grace, neither rising nor falling, only drifting in vast, silent waves. The world felt infinite again, and yet she felt no smallness, only belonging. In the soft glow, the fox's fur glistened, every strand outlined by the aurora's tender shimmer. The snow around her seemed to sigh under the weight of light. She walked forward, leaving behind a trail of prints that glowed faintly for a moment before the snow reclaimed them. She paused at the edge of a frozen stream, the surface covered by a thin layer of frost that mirrored the sky's light. Carefully, she pressed a paw to it. The faintest crackle echoed outward, gentle, delicate, vanishing instantly. Beneath the ice, the slow movement of water whispered like a secret dream. She lowered her head to listen. The sound was soft and steady, like a heartbeat buried beneath layers of snow. It felt familiar, comforting, a rhythm that had always been there, even when unheard. For a while, Liora lingered by the stream, watching the colors of the aurora shift above her. The snow continued to fall, slow, endless, inevitable, covering her tracks, smoothing every path. It was as if the land itself wished to remain unmarked, whole, and timeless. When she finally turned away, she did so without looking back. There was no need to remember what the snow would soon forget. Her movement slowed as she reached the far side of the valley, where a low mound offered shelter from the wind. She curled herself against the snowtail, sweeping around her like a silken blanket. Above, the aurora pulsed softly, light flowing like breath across the sky. The world around her settled into stillness once more. The air was filled only with the soft sound of falling snow, a sound too gentle to disturb even thought. Her eyes grew heavy. The day's journey had been quiet, but within that quiet lay the deepest kind of peace. The kind that needed no ending, only rest. And as she drifted into light sleep, the Arctic continued its own endless rhythm, snow falling light, moving silence, deepening, all wrapped around the gentle heart of the fox. Night had fully descended now. The horizon no longer held the faint lavender of twilight, but had deepened into a cool, an endless blue. Above the white expanse, the aurora danced no longer a thin ribbon, but a slow-moving ocean of light, undulating in silence. Its hues blended from emerald to pale gold, then to the faintest violet. Each wave of color rippled soundlessly across the sky, reflecting on the snow like the shimmer of dreams. Liora stirred beneath her blanket of snow. Her small form had nearly vanished into the whiteness. Only the slow rhythm of her breathing revealing her presence. Around her, the land exhaled, frost-quiet clouds of ice crystals rising and dissolving into the still air. The Arctic had entered its deepest calm, the kind of stillness that feels infinite. When Liora opened her eyes, the world seemed both real and imagined. The air shimmered faintly, as though it carried traces of memory. The aurora's glow brushed her fur, tinting it faintly green, then silver again. She rose slowly, stretching her movements unhurried and fluid, and took a few steps across the soft crust of snow. Every sound seemed distant, not gone, but muffled, softened, transformed into something dreamlike. The snow beneath her paws gave a faint sigh with each step. In the silence, that sound felt like music. The land unfolded before her in quiet layers, distant ridges glowing faintly under the aurora, a line of frozen pines leaning into the light, the faint impression of old fox tracks leading toward the horizon. She followed no path now. The world had become a drifting dream where movement itself was its own destination. Liora's eyes half closed as she walked, her breath steady. The air tasted faintly of snow and starlight, crisp clean, but softened by distance. Each inhale carried a touch of cold clarity. Each exhale left a small wisp of warmth in the air. Somewhere deep beneath the snow, water moved slowly through frozen channels, a sound more felt than heard. It pulsed in quiet rhythm with her heartbeat, the two blending into one long, seamless cadence. The aurora brightened suddenly, washing the snowfield in liquid color. The shadows melted away, replaced by an almost dreamlike glow. The fox's fur glimmered with every step she took, as if she carried part of the light within her. The air seemed to move in slow waves around her, each motion carrying the weightless beauty of stillness. In the distance, faint shapes appeared, perhaps low stones or the curved tops of snow-laden shrubs. They seemed to shift gently in the haze, dissolving into mist as she approached. It was impossible to tell what was real and what belonged only to the quiet imagination of the night. But it did not matter. In this world, everything belonged. The seen and unseen, the sound and silence, all merged into one peaceful expanse. She paused, looking upward. The aurora's light drifted down like liquid silk. For a brief moment, she imagined it touching her face, like the hand of the wind-cool, patient kind. In that moment, she felt as though the earth itself was breathing through her. Every flake of snow, every curve of the land, every distant glimmer of starlight, all pulsing gently in rhythm with her own heart. She closed her eyes again and listened to the silence. The silence had depth now, like water. Beneath its surface lay layers of unseen motion, the quiet stretch of roots beneath the ice, the small stirring of snow settling under its own weight, the faint hum of frozen air shifting with temperature. The Arctic was alive, but not in sound or movement. It lived in stillness, in the way it held everything tenderly, with no need to rush or change. Liora walked further, her paws sinking softly into untouched snow. Each step was an act of devotion, slow, mindful, precise. Her fur caught the aurora's colors, painting her white coat with soft ribbons of green and violet. A few flakes drifted past her muzzle, catching the faintest glint of light before disappearing. They reminded her of moments fleeting, perfect, melting back into the vastness that birthed them. For a while, she simply stood there, her gaze lost in the slow unfolding of light. The stars shimmered faintly beyond the aurora's glow, patient and distant. The world no longer seemed vast or cold, only endless, welcoming and quiet. Now, a gentle breeze began to move across the plain, so soft it barely disturbed the snow. It carried a low hum, the faint resonance of wind moving through far-off ice. The sound was neither near nor far, but everywhere a lullaby for the land itself. Liora lay down upon the snow again, curling her tail close, resting her chin atop her paws. The aurora pulsed above her, its rhythm matching her slow breathing. Her eyes blinked once, then grew heavy. The world began to blur at the edges, snow melting into sky, sky melting into light. Her thoughts drifted in the same slow current as the wind. There were no more lines between waking and dreaming. The Arctic had become one vast dreamscape, and Liora, its quiet heart, was floating gently within it. The snow whispered softly around her as she surrendered to rest, each flake a note in the night's wordless song.
Kaya mo ba, Ki?
The night deepened into stillness. All movement slowed, all sound softened. The snow no longer seemed to fall. It drifted, suspended in air so calm that time itself appeared to hesitate. Above the aurora shimmered faintly its colors, muted now, breathing in long, gentle waves across the sky. Liora lay nestled in her hollow of snow, her white fur dusted with the faint glitter of frost. Around her, the Arctic was silent, not empty, but full of presence, the kind that fills the air with quiet meaning. Her breath rose and fell soft as the flicker of a candle in still air. Each exhale made a small cloud that lingered before vanishing into the frozen light. The ground beneath her felt alive in its own frozen way, a slow vibration, subtle as thought. Beneath meters of ice and snow, rivers still whispered. Beneath that, the deep heart of the earth murmured in sleep. It was an old sound, one that carried neither beginning nor end. Liora's ears twitched at the faintest sigh of wind brushing through the distance. It wasn't enough to stir the snow, only to trace a note through the air, a single thread of sound in a sea of quiet. She closed her eyes again, her body perfectly still, yet her awareness wide as the sky. In her half-dreaming state, she began to sense the vastness differently. The aurora above became the slow turning of thought, the snow's soft whisper, a pulse beneath her own breathing. Every detail, the cold, the silence, the endless white felt like part of something greater, something patient and infinite. As the night unfolded, faint hues began to shift at the edges of the horizon. The first touch of dawn, not light yet, but the idea of it began to gather. The stars dimmed, slightly veiled by the faintest band of silver. Liora rose slowly, stretching her body with a graceful motion, shaking snow from her fur. Tiny crystals scattered into the air, catching what little light the sky offered. Her paws pressed faintly into the snow, the sound of each step merging with the steady hush of the Arctic's breath. She walked across the open field, guided not by destination, but by rhythm, the slow meditative pattern of her own movement. Her tail brushed the snow as she went, drawing soft lines that shimmered briefly before fading. Far off, a ridge curved toward the horizon. Liora moved in its direction, her form small but sure against the vastness. As she walked, the aurora began to wane, its colors fading into thin veils of pale blue. The stars above withdrew one by one, like lanterns dimming at dawn. Down to Tishra, she reached the ridge just as the sky began to change. A faint glow touched the horizon, not yet the sun, but its promise. The light was fragile, like silk stretched thin across the air. It glinted on the snow, awakening tiny sparks of color. Liora sat upon the ridge and watched. The world below her was unbroken white, undisturbed, and serene. Her breath mingled with the faint mist rising from the snow, blurring her outline into the land. The sky deepened from silver to rose, from rose to a faint, ethereal gold. The Arctic was awakening, but quietly, reverently, as though afraid to disturb its own dream. The fox's gaze followed the slow spill of color across the horizon. She blinked once, slow and calm. The snow glowed softly beneath her, and the air shimmered with a light that felt less like illumination and more like memory. The wind shifted, not cold now, but carrying warmth from far-off places, a whisper of renewal. Leora's fur rippled gently, her ears tilting toward the sound. She closed her eyes, letting the breeze move through her as if it were brushing away the remnants of a dream. The land stretched outward, infinite and welcoming. In that quiet expanse, nothing was rushed, nothing demanded. Everything simply was alive in stillness, radiant in calm. The snowflakes that fell now were larger, softer, glowing faintly in the dawn light. They landed upon her fur like gentle blessings, melting slowly into her warmth. Above the last faint trace of the aurora lingered a pale arc dissolving into the morning sky. It pulsed once, twice, then vanished. Liora opened her eyes again, gazing at the wide horizon. There was no change in her, yet something had settled, a deep knowing, soft as rest. The world had turned, and she had turned with it.
Ani że
As the first true light of morning touched the land, the Arctic shimmered as though made of crystal and breath. The silence did not end. It simply changed key from the hush of night to the quiet song of day. Liora began to walk again, leaving behind the hollow where she had rested. Her tracks stretched gently across the snow, weaving between faint rises and soft hollows. Each step carried her deeper into the light, and as she moved, the world around her seemed to hum a sound without sound, a melody of peace. The snow, the sky, the faint golden light all blended into one serene harmony. The Arctic sang to itself in silence, and the little fox, calm and content, moved within that song, her heart beating in rhythm with the earth. The night's dream had not ended, it had only become morning. And in that endless whiteness, she walked as though time itself was still sleeping, wrapped in the peaceful lullaby of winter. Morning had arrived without fanfare. No blaze of light, no sharp edges of shadow, only the slow blooming of a soft golden glow across the snow. The Arctic morning was a whisper, not a declaration. Its brightness was tender, diffused by the frozen air, turning every drift into a gentle mirror for the sun's quiet warmth. Liora moved through that pale light with measured grace. The snow beneath her paws glittered faintly, and the air carried the scent of ice kissed by sun. Crisp, faintly metallic, tinged with something pure. Each breath she drew was cool, but not cold, her lungs filling with the hush of the new day. The world looked different in daylight, yet no less serene. The blue tones of night had softened into white and pearl, touched here and there by the gold of dawn. The aurora's memory lingered faintly, its traces still visible in the sheen of ice along the ridges. The sky stretched high and endless, pale as brushed silk, with thin ribbons of cloud drifting as if half asleep. Liora's shadow followed her lightly across the snow, a soft shape that came and went with the dips of the land. She walked without haste, her fur glowing faintly where the sunlight caught it. Her paws made small indentations, rhythmic and evenly spaced, soon to be filled again by drifting powder. A group of snow buntings passed overhead, their wings slicing soundlessly through the air. For a moment, their feathers caught the sunlight, bright white with flashes of silver gray, then they vanished beyond the horizon. Liora watched them go, her gaze calm and curious. Their motion felt like a thought passing through the still mind of the morning. She came upon a hollow where the snow had gathered deep between two low rises. In its center, a smooth stone protruded, half covered by ice. Liora approached and touched her nose to it. The stone was cool but not frozen. It held a faint warmth, perhaps from the sun that had brushed it moments before. The fox sat beside it, curling her tail around her paws. From here, the view spread wide ridges in the distance, faint lines of snow-covered tundra, and the delicate shimmer of light where ice met sky. The sound of her breathing blended seamlessly with the faint whisper of wind. It was hard to tell where one began and the other ended. The two became a single rhythm: inhale, exhale, pause. The same pattern repeated endlessly by the land itself. A fine mist began to rise from the snow, catching the light like smoke. It curled and drifted, swirling gently around her before dissolving. Liora's eyes half closed as she watched her body motionless, her thoughts quiet. The Arctic was meditating, and she was its stillness made visible. Far off, a faint cracking sound reached her ears, the slow natural shifting of ice beneath the weight of day. It was not sharp or startling. It was the earth adjusting, a deep exhale after long rest. The sound echoed softly through the distance, a low hum beneath the air's silence. Liora listened for a while, her ears twitching slightly. The sound came again, then faded, replaced by nothing at all. It was as though the world had whispered a single word and then forgotten it. She rose, stretching snowflakes tumbling from her fur. The sun hung low, its light moving slowly, casting no glare, only softness. The sky had turned faintly amber, now the kind of color that carries warmth without heat. Liora began to walk again, following a line of faint snow ridges. The ground dipped and rose beneath her, each curve of the land echoing her steps. Occasionally, she would pause, tilt her head, and listen to the distance, to the snow, shifting to the faint brush of wind over ice, to the silence that followed. Every sound became a part of her. Every pause deepened the calm. After some time, she reached a shallow valley where sunlight spilled in gentle arcs over the snow. Here, the light seemed almost tangible, soft enough to touch. The snow sparkled with flecks of color: gold, silver, pale blue. It was the Arctic's quiet form of joy, subtle and serene. Liora sat down again, her breath visible in small clouds. She watched as the wind traced faint spirals across the snow, lifting fine powder into the air. The movement was delicate, like silk drifting through water. In the middle of that silence, she felt the faint stirring of memory, not of a specific time, but of something older and simpler. The steady rhythm of seasons, the return of light after long darkness, the quiet promise that every stillness carries within it the seed of renewal. Her gaze softened. The snow was no longer just snow. It was time made visible, slow and patient, carrying every moment in its endless fall. The air grew brighter as the sun climbed slightly higher, though its warmth remained gentle. Shadows shortened. The world seemed to shimmer with quiet energy, a calm vitality rather than motion. Liora rose once more, moving toward the light. Her fur glowed, her eyes steady. Around her, the Arctic breathed, vast and silent, alive and dreaming. She paused at the top of a small hill, looking out across the open tundra. The land stretched endlessly before her, a sea of white and gold. The air was still, the light tender. She closed her eyes for a moment, letting the sun rest upon her face. The warmth was faint but real, a reminder that even here in the deepest quiet, the world's heart continued to beat. The Arctic was not asleep. She thought it was simply resting as she was, within the long rhythm of peace. And in that moment, the land and the fox and the sky seemed to breathe as one, a single unbroken exhale of stillness. Liora's tail swayed gently, brushing the snow, leaving behind a faint curved line, a quiet signature of her passing. The snow sparkled once more in the growing light, and the Arctic sang again, softly, beneath the quiet sun. By evening, the light had begun to fade again, though not into darkness, only into softness. The sun drifted low behind a curtain of pale cloud, tinting the world in gentle amber and rose. The snow reflected those colors faintly, so that even the land seemed to blush with quiet warmth before surrendering to night. Liora moved through this changing light, her fur shifting in hue with every step. In the golden hour, she appeared almost radiant, a small flame of white among endless snow. The air had grown still again, holding the silence like glass. Even the wind seemed to rest, watching. The first stars began to appear one by one, faint and far apart. They blinked softly above the horizon, each reflection mirrored on the frozen land below. Liora paused to look upward. The sky was opening, a slow unfurling of velvet blue. The faintest trace of the aurora hovered above the ridge, a memory of night returning. She sat her tail wrapping around her paws and let her gaze drift across the distance. Every horizon here looked familiar. The same quiet curves of snow, the same soft gleam of light. Yet each one carried a subtle difference, a whisper of its own character. The Arctic never repeated itself. It simply continued, patient and eternal. A faint sound reached her, the rustle of wind moving through far-off ice. It was not strong enough to stir her fur, but it carried something, a low, harmonious note that resonated in the still air. The land, she thought, was singing again. Not loudly, not to be heard, but to exist. She rose and began to walk toward a wide open plain where the snow lay smooth and untouched. As she moved, her shadow stretched, long and pale behind her, fading as twilight deepened. The temperature dipped gently. The cold did not bite it, merely settled steady and clear. Liora's breath became visible again. Small wisps of silver drifting upward, catching faint starlight before disappearing. The snow here had a new texture, fine, crystalline, almost weightless. Each flake crunched faintly beneath her paws, a sound like soft paper folding. She slowed her pace, listening to it matching her breath to its rhythm. The stars above multiplied, spilling their quiet brilliance across the sky. Their reflections glinted in every drift, turning the plain into a mirror of constellations. For a moment, it seemed as though Liora was walking not across snow, but through the stars themselves. At the center of the plain, she stopped. The silence around her deepened, vast, comforting, infinite. The stars shone steadily overhead, and a faint green shimmer appeared at the edge of the sky, the aurora returning once more. The ribbons of light moved differently tonight, slower, wider, as if stretching in a long, contented yawn. Their colors shifted through green silver and a quiet violet that faded at the edges like watercolor. The snow caught those shades, absorbing and reflecting them in turn. Liora watched her body still, her mind at rest. The aurora felt like breath moving through the sky, inhaling, exhaling, just as she did. Each pulse of light mirrored the calm beating of her heart. The world around her seemed to hum softly, a vibration too delicate for sound. The snowflakes shimmered faintly, responding to the aurora's rhythm. The Arctic had become an orchestra of stillness. Every drift, every flake every heartbeat part of the same slow, luminous song.
Ada.
She closed her eyes, allowing the light to play against her fur. Behind her eyelids, she could still see its colors, not as vision, but as warmth. A pulse of green, a wave of silver, a long exhale of violet fading into blue. When she opened them again, the world had changed. The stars appeared closer now, their reflections sharp in the frozen ground. The air itself seemed to glow faintly. Liora lowered herself to the snow, resting her chin on her paws. The aurora moved above her in gentle arcs, slower than before, each shift a sigh. She felt the stillness settle through her, not as sleep yet, but as its beginning. The snow beneath her was cool, but not unkind. It yielded to her weight like soft down, cradling her shape. The world was vast, but in that vastness was comfort. The feeling that nothing was expected, nothing demanded, only being.
Murdered.
As the aurora reached its quiet peak, a faint halo formed around the horizon, a silver glow that merged with the snow's brightness. Liora's eyes fluttered closed again, her breath steady, slow, unbroken. Around her, the Arctic whispered its lullaby, a song made of silence, light, and the deep rhythm of the earth beneath ice. The night grew colder, but the fox did not move. She was part of it now, a white shape in a white world, indistinguishable from the calm itself. The stars above pulsed faintly in their infinite patience. The aurora continued its gentle dance, and the snow, endless and soft, continued to fall. In the heart of that stillness, the world breathed out, and everything for a long, tender moment rested within the glow beneath the stars. The night had grown deep and clear. Above the sleeping land, the aurora faded to a faint silver arc, soft as breath. The stars now filled the sky completely, countless, and calm, their light steady, unblinking. The snow no longer shimmered with color, only with quiet reflection, a faint echo of the heavens above. Liora lay still in her hollow, her body half covered by snow that had fallen during the long hours. Her fur blended seamlessly with the ground, only the gentle rise and fall of her breathing showing where she rested. Around her, the Arctic was perfectly still, so quiet that even the sound of silence seemed to hum. The air was cold, but not sharp. It carried the freshness of eternity, that clean, infinite scent of frozen air and untouched snow. Each breath Liora took felt ancient, as though the world itself exhaled through her. The horizon had softened again, not dark, but glowing faintly. The light of stars reflected in the low mist that had begun to rise. The mist drifted slowly, curling and unfolding like thought. It wrapped the world in delicate veils, making each shape ridge drift. Fox appear, both present and imagined. Liora opened her eyes. For a moment, the entire sky was reflected in them. Stars, faint aurora, the hint of dawn waiting somewhere beyond the horizon. She did not move. There was no need to. Stillness was no longer something she entered. It was something she was. A small flake landed upon her muzzle light as air. Another followed, and another. Soon, the air filled again with snow, not heavy, but endless, fine as dust falling in graceful spirals. The world was being remade once more, layer by layer, softly and without sound. The wind did not stir. The snow fell perfectly straight, each flake descending like a single note in a silent song. The fox closed her eyes again. The snow gathered gently across her fur, the warmth of her body melting each flake that lingered too long. The sensation was almost musical. A touch, a fade, a whisper. In the distance, faint light began to bloom. Not sunrise yet, but the promise of it. A faint silver washed the farthest edge of the sky, and the stars seemed to bow before it, their brightness softening in reverence. Time here was unmeasured. The Arctic did not mark hours, it simply breathed. Night and day were not opposites, but two sides of one long exhale. As the light grew slowly stronger, Liora stirred. Her body uncurled, her tail sweeping across the snow in a graceful arc. She rose to her feet, her small prints forming anew in the fresh layer of white. Her movements were unhurried. She paused often to listen, to breathe, to watch how the light shifted across the landscape. The snow beneath her paws was cool and smooth, the sound of each step barely perceptible. The horizon brightened further, deepening into pearl and pale rose. The Arctic sky began to glow again, not in color, but in clarity. A light that held no edge, only kindness. Bo, Liora walked toward that growing light. Behind her, her trail stretched across the snow, a fragile thread, soon to vanish. Ahead of her, the world opened wide, endless and waiting. She did not hurry. Her pace matched the land's slow rhythm, each step part of the same quiet pattern that had always been. The snow continued to fall, wrapping everything in its soft whisper. As she reached the crest of a low hill, she stopped once more. From here, she could see the full curve of the horizon. A world without division. Sky melting into snow, Snow melting into mist, mist dissolving into light. She sat down, her tail curling neatly beside her. The breeze brushed her fur, carrying the faintest sound, not of words, not of music, but of presence. The sound of the world existing patient and whole. The dawn finally broke, though gently, as if afraid to disturb the dream. The first rays touched the snow and turned it silver. The mist glowed faintly pink, the sky above a wash of pale gold. Everything shimmered not brightly, but softly, like breath on glass. Liora closed her eyes again, feeling the warmth of light seep into her fur. For the first time in many hours, she felt truly weightless, as though the snow beneath her no longer supported her body, but her spirit. The Arctic sang its final note, a long silent chord of stillness and light. In that harmony, Liora rested. The world exhaled once more. The snow fell. The silence dreamed. And as morning rose across the endless white, the little fox drifted again into her soft, eternal sleep, at peace within the song of the Arctic, beneath the quiet sky.